Welcome to the Principal Podcast, where we talk about how the best professional services firms grow. Whether you're looking to scale your firm or learn from the stories of founders and leaders who've done it, you're in the right place. Join us as we interview the best leaders in professional services. Let's get on with the show. Stephane, welcome to the Principal Podcast. Happy to have you.
Happy to be here.
Let's jump straight in. What's the story? What led you from scientific research to consulting? And what made you build DeciBio? Hopefully I'm pronouncing it right.
You are. So I did my PhD at Yale University in a very large lab that attracted a lot of people who, like to take the initiative and start companies or were comfortable working without too much guidance from their PI. And as a result, I started actually 3 companies when I was in grad school with some lab mates. And obviously, none of them became the next gen in tech, but it really developed the interest that I had on the business side of science. And I love biology. I probably have a bit of ADHD. I like things that are fast-paced. And as a result, it did seem like consulting would fit my attention span. And so I went at Edit Consulting for a couple of years, got an offer from one of our clients, Life Technologies, because I worked on a merger between Invitrogen and Applied Biosystem. And my wife actually is the one who said, you always talk about Illumina. Why don't you apply to Illumina? I rushed an application there, made it to the final round, that they picked the other guy. But when they called me, they said, do not take the offer from Life Tech. We'll give you, we'll probably land a job here in the next 3 to 6 months. So I actually started DeciBio as a placeholder, thinking I'm going to do that for 3 to 6 months and then go and work at Illumina. But it took off pretty quickly. Really enjoyed the work that I was doing as a freelancer at the time. And then, as I said, it took off.
So love that. So I guess you didn't go for that position in the next 3 to 6 months. Did they get back to you proposing the job offer?
They did. I'm actually still very much in touch with Crane Harris, who now became a good friend over the last 15 years, who is the person who told me that story. Is still joking with me all the time that he should own equity in DeciBio, because without me, the company would not exist, which is true.
Because you would have taken the job at the other position, at the other company, sorry? And
exactly. I would have taken the job at Life Tech, but because of the discussion that we had, it did say, it's very clear that you love next-gen sequencing, which, Illumina is a leader in that space. Mm-hmm. And that, you were just not the right person for this exact role, but I'm confident you will find you a job here at this company.
Love that. Mm-hmm. So all this leading to what, Stephane? What is the problem that you help solving now with DeciBio?
So I think because of my scientific background, as you mentioned, where we shine is when clients have a problem that is at the intersection of business and science. And we like to tell people that we do our best work when having a deep content expertise or technical expertise is materially affect the strategic answer that you have to make. And it's not always the case. In some cases, you don't need to understand all of the nuances of a technology. But when these nuances actually matter, in order for you to launch that test, we tend to be a really good partner for the work here. And in addition to the test itself, once the test it launches, the reality is that for that test to be adopted by the medical community, you do need to have a certain amount of you need to build a system around it. That test has to be reimbursed, et cetera, et cetera. So we understand not only the test, but also the ecosystem that comes around it that enables its full adoption.
It's rare that I'm learning stuff on this podcast now after more than 450 interviews with high-ticket professional service firm owners. So this is super interesting. Who needs that? Who are you doing this for?
So we're doing this for, if you actually think about the entire chain of what happens to a patient when they get sick, it often starts with the diagnosis of that patient, right? You go to the doctor because something's wrong. And so the majority of our clients are these diagnostic companies, the companies that, if you take a COVID test, I'm sure many of the listeners here have, unfortunately, those are our clients, the companies that develop these tests. But the reality is that the companies that develop these tests, they actually do need technologies and tools. And the research tools companies that offer this technology to these clients are also part of our ecosystem. And similarly, the biopharma companies that actually work with these diagnostic companies in order to develop drugs that have the right diagnostics are also part of that ecosystem. So we work with the diagnostic companies at the center, but also what is it that they source from, so that they can always have access to the latest technologies, the more disruptive technologies, as well as the biopharma players who actually have to rely on these diagnostic tools to develop the next generation of medicine.
So, to make it understandable to the audience and quite realistically to me, I'm going to take a real life example that I don't think I've ever shared on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I got a hair transplant in France by a renowned surgeon, blah, blah, blah. Then, instead of the traditional generic treatments to prevent further hair loss, he gave me a treatment that was based on my genetics, on my DNA, which I understand we would call precision medicine. Is that what we're talking about here? You're helping the firms who develop those tests to match the right hair loss treatments based on the DNA? Is that?
That's exactly right. So the vast majority of the space or that we cover is precision medicine, which frankly, in 1 or 2 decades, is just going to be called medicine. Right now, when you look at medicine, it's really one size fits all. You go to the doctor, and when I look at my wife, she is 100 pounds soaking wet, and she would get the same amount of aspirin as Shaq. That doesn't make any sense, right? It's you should have each of these medicine being tailored not only to who you are as a person, but also, to your point, for your genetics. And so we do believe that right now the current healthcare system is very entrenched into this sick care model, where we treat people once they have symptoms and these symptoms have developed. But once you actually start to understand more about the genetics of people, it's going to enable you to be much more preventative in what you do in order to help patients stay healthy, as opposed to address symptoms when they actually start to appear. So this is an entire continuum here. Like, even the companies that are offering screening tests would be part of the ecosystem that we cover.
A bit of a curveball question already. We're completely going on a tangent here, but now I'm just curious. Isn't that industry specifically very prone to be disrupted by AI?
In part. So it could be disrupted, but AI is more likely going to be additive to it.
Okay.
Because the reality is that biology is, as you know, absurdly complex, right? And there is multiple layers of DNA, RNA, protein, what people refer to as the metabolome, which is like what are like the metabolomics in your body. And so because it's so complex, like right now, the level of understanding that we have, for example, of the brain or the immune system is actually extremely rudimentary. And what's going to happen with AI, I hope, and I think, is that we're going to be able to just unlock some of this understanding of this biology. Because the reason why the biology is so complex, and now we're really going on a tangent, is really not due because of the complexity of who we are humans that are fully formed, but probably more because of like the 4 billions of years of history that we have, starting from a single cell. And we have all of that history of evolution that has been baked in, as well as the fact that when we are born, we start from a single cell, and you have to form this extremely complex organism. So, and all of these instructions have to be self-assembling, right? And so the level of complexity that's built into our cells is probably extremely excessive to the complexity that you need in order to make our body work when it is actually fully formed. So one of the hope is that with AI, you might be able to find shortcuts in order to actually help you solve the biology and help someone when they're sick. Just the same way that when we actually developed a plane, we didn't try to replicate flight by looking at what a bird is doing. We created something that is complex, but far less complex than the complexity that you have in a bird, arguably.
I mean, the way you talk about it is true. I'm thinking are we 1 cell or 2 cells to begin with? It's a spermatozoid merging with an ovula. So is that considered? But that's 1 cell that is created out of this.
That's correct, because each of these are like actually half a cell. It has half of the genetic information.
I love this. Shows you how much I know about genetics. Okay, I could ask you questions on this all day, but I feel the audience is also here to learn about the business of consulting, Stephane. So maybe an encore episode, who knows?
Yes.
So tell me again who you serve and who makes the decision of hiring DeciBio. Like, who do you need to get in front of to get someone to say, hey, we need help with whatever it is that you're doing with precision medicine?
Yeah, so the clients that we serve, I would say as we just discussed, it's about a third, a third, a third in terms of our revenues. We serve the tools companies that offer
Mm-hmm.
the instruments and reagents to the diagnostic companies that can now serve pharma and clinicians to help make decisions. And interestingly enough, the type of client that we have, we actually tend to think about them less in terms of the who they are, but more in terms of the decisions that they have to make or the problem that they have to solve, right? That's what it comes down to. And they typically come to us because they have just actually like a patient, a presenting symptom when they're like, well, they have this issue that I need you to solve. And what we do is we go through this exploratory process with them, trying to ask some question to figure out what is it that we can do that's going to enable you to have enough evidence to make a decision to solve that that problem that you have. Now, the folks that come to us typically tend to be at the senior director, VP level. We work with executive, like C-level executive, but it's more rare. A lot of time, people come to us because they own a decision to be made with regard to a transaction that they're about to make. We're about to buy this company. I'm like the VP of R&D. I'm gonna have to just justify to the CEO why it is that she needs to pull the trigger on this.
So that's interesting. The person in the company who has the need is VP of R&D, whoever at the VP level or above who faces a problem that needs solving by you. But they are not the ultimate decision maker. The ultimate decision maker is the CEO who's going to say, yes, we'll spend the money to make sure that you, VP of R&D, feel comfortable with that merger and acquisition and that you're going to get the support you need to do XYZ.
Yes, so you're right. It is a complex sales process. Interesting enough, that it's very rare that a single person makes a decision to go with DeciBio or another consulting firm. It's typically a group of somewhere between 3 to 5 people, and sometimes it goes all the way to the board. The board actually has to sign off on the decision to hire us. But in general, there is one champion, one person with whom we essentially define the project, the scope, exactly define the problem. Actually, it's half the battle. If you can actually really clearly define what the problem is, then we all know how to do the job actually quite well. So this first half of the project is really critical.
What has worked for you, Stephane, to get the attention of the VPs of R&D or similar who have the problem so that they can say, hey, we need DeciBio here. But at the same time, do enough educational brand awareness exercise to get the CEO to say yes when your name is brought on the table? How do you guys think about branding and marketing at this stage?
Yeah, so each of the partners actually have a slightly different approach at DeciBio, but ultimately the one thing we all have in common is that it comes back to relationship building and trust, right? Is that the person who is signing the check and the person who actually make the decision to come with DeciBio have to feel like those people are going to be able to actually solve my pain points. They come to us not because this consulting project costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they typically need to be done in anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks. So they come when they have a very acute pain that we need to solve, and they have to really trust that you're gonna make their problem your problem in some sense. That is like, now I am actually here to help you solve that issue, to help you make that decision and bring the evidence that's gonna make this decision actually defensible. So in order to build trust, what you need to do ultimately is the easy answer is that over decades you need to do good work. And when you do good work, people remember it. They jump from company to company, and then they say, oh, last time I had a similar issue, I did bring in DeciBio, and they were actually very helpful. And one thing that you can do in order to try to accelerate trust is we actually post a lot of content on LinkedIn, because the web has a very long memory, right? And it's a risky bet, but the reason we like to do that is because we actually, first, it forces us to stay humble about, when is it that we're wrong, but also it enables us to actually go back in time and show people, look, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, we had the following post that essentially forecasted what would happen here. And when people see that we have the track record of seeing some of these emerging technology early on, it tends to be actually very helpful for us to build a narrative that they should be going with DeciBio as opposed to a competitor. The second thing is that ultimately we also look at each of the I was going to say patients, but each of the clients that we have as human beings. And, when I use the term vacation pretty loosely, and you can ask my wife again, and she'd be the first one to say that whenever we go on vacation somewhere, I always have to go get coffee with one or two people. In a week, I'm going to be going to France on vacation with some friends. My mom's going to be there, and I'm going to go see some clients in Annecy for coffee. And I'm doing that not because it's not work, is I actually do care about these people. You build a relationship with them, and now you actually do want to spend time with these people in person. And I think that's the more you can do that and really start to care about people as individual, because you feel like you have shared values and shared goals, which in our case at DeciBio is to accelerate the adoption of precision medicine. It really helps build trust, and as a result, build credibility internally.
So lots of content on LinkedIn, in-person meetings.
Mm-hmm.
What else? When you know that trust is the number one thing, what does build trust at scale? But I don't even know if you need scale. You need trust in front of the few VPs of R&Ds in target companies and so on. But like moving forward, what do you think is going to be the way to build that trust, especially in a trust recession time like we are in right now, where anyone can claim anything on the internet, especially on LinkedIn? So how are you thinking about this for the future?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And ultimately, what we do is consulting is kind of tough because it actually scales with people. And as you scale, you have to be very mindful of not diluting your culture and not diluting the level of expertise that you have, making sure that you don't send off the edges, if you will, that make your company unique, right? And so the way that we scale trust, again, is just making sure that we continue to hire and retain the best talent internally, that we continue to have this belief of this the mission that we have, so that people actually do care about precision medicine, they do care about disruptive technologies, and as a result, we have this group of people that continue to be able to serve more and more clients. So I think it's really the trust that you have with your clients scales with the number of partners and the scale of your company. And like one interesting question that we're wrestling with right now internally actually is, well, what does that going to look like in 2 to 3 years with AI coming on the docket? I used to be in a camp about 6 months ago that AI was actually a real threat to our business model, and now more and more I'm actually starting to slowly migrate to the camp of, sure, it is a threat, but it is also an opportunity. Just the same way that Excel spreadsheets back in the day we thought was going to be a threat to Wall Street. It's like, well, you don't need all these analysts doing calculation on a piece of paper. One person with Excel is going to replace 1,000 people doing math on sheet of papers. Same thing with Google. In the early days, people thought, you don't need McKinsey anymore. You can just Google it. Why would you want to pay a fortune to consultants? But the reality is that all of these tools are going to enable us to be the best at doing what we do. And these pain points and these decisions are going to continue to exist.
It's an interesting analogy. The way I see this obviously with podcast and with this one-on-one conversation format is AI makes it easier to scale everything, and it's going to disrupt tons of stuff, and it is disrupting content for sure. But one, making it relatable. I mean, at the end of the day, what matters to people is stakes, right? When we think about Jimmy, Mr. Beast, for instance, here we go, balloons, on YouTube, why does this video about 10 people competing for $5 million does so well? It's stakes as well. Like if AI, and it would come up with exactly the same video, nobody would watch it because those are not real people who can win real money. And so like stakes is so important. And I feel in a field like yours, stake is probably everything, Stephane, like a precision medicine, which is at the very root of like the next generation of medicine. As you said, in 10 to 20 years, it will be called medicine. So yeah, I think you're right. And that's true for most consulting. We're still going to pay for the relatability, and when there's going to be high stakes, just to be able to point the finger at someone.
And to your point, it's true. It's interesting. The same thing happened in chess, that people actually question. I love chess. I play quite a bit of it. And people were saying, when these bots were coming online, oh my God, they're just so good. Like, why would you even watch Karu or Magnus Carlsen play a game anymore? And the reality is that you actually do still care about, the stake of these two human beings actually fighting it off. Yeah. Although they would both now get crushed by their phone. This is how good this boss have gotten. So there is something to be said also about whenever you are human and you're about to make a decision, having someone in your camp who can be there and say like, no, listen, this is the right decision. And it's not just ChatGPT. There is something definitely reassuring about this, about you feel like, well, this person has been around for decades. They've seen a lot of things, as opposed to ChatGPT was, would tell you 5 prompts later, oh yeah, sorry, I was wrong. This was actually the answer. Not that we always right and ChatGPT is wrong, but there is some accountability that comes with being a human and helping other human making a decision that I think will continue to matter.
This is such a good analogy. And same thing, right? It stakes. Like, yeah, sure, we can watch computer play against each other at chess all day, but like, is that going to be interesting? Probably not. What we want to see is the sweat, the human failure, and the drama around it.
That's right.
Going back to one of the things that you mentioned earlier, Stephane, which was very complex sales cycles. So how do you guys go about this? How do you move from this content, trust, one-on-one conversations during vacations, whether your wife likes it or not, to a sales conversation, an SOW, a letter of engagement, we rock and roll? What does sales motion look like at DeciBio?
So the sales process typically is about 2 weeks. I mean, it can be as short as a day. Sometimes people call you and they say, listen, we got to move. Let's start tomorrow. And typically you then already have a relationship with that. But the more typical project, it takes about 2 weeks and something like 3 to 4 touch points. I think there is a mistake that we probably made very early in the inception of DeciBio, is to think that you can just send a proposal and you're done. But as I said, it's so important to come up with the right questions and for the people to feel like you actually really want to help them solve the right questions, that typically we have something like 3 or 4 touch points with each of our clients, making sure that they fold in other decision makers when they can. Sometimes they're willing to, sometimes they're not. And it's this back and forth that in some sense enables you to build that trust, that micro trust for that specific project, if that makes sense, right? It's interesting that trust is this thing that compounds with each interaction that you have with the person. And, being willing to tell people, we won't be able to tell you with this aspect of the project, this is what we can do, this is what we cannot do. I think it's something that's important, but ultimately it's over 2 or 3 weeks, we would have something like 4 touch points with our potential clients to just try to make sure that we really narrow down the exact needs and try to articulate the exact benefit of going to with DeciBio, as opposed to the features of what it's like to go with DeciBio. It's not about trying to us saying like, those are the features of what we sell. It's more about us telling them those are the benefits of what you'll get by working with us.
Benefits, not features, is how we roll. I like the style. Talk to me about retention. How does it work in your world? You come in, you help a VP of R&D on all things merger and acquisition with the next big deal, and then what? How do you guys think about client retention, recurring revenue, reoccurring revenue maybe? How do you guys think about that?
So it's really about making sure that people feel like you actually continue to care about them after you're done with the project. So for us, retentions means that, sometimes 3 to 6 months after we finish a project for our client, there is a news that drop that either confirms or rejects some of the hypotheses that we might have as part of the project. And it's just immediately following up with that person saying like, hey, I'm assuming you saw this news. This is interesting. This is very much in line with what we predicted, or actually we thought it wasn't going to happen. And here is what that means for you, right? It's just having these continued touch points over time. Many of the clients also that we work with right now are people that we work with over 3 or 4 different companies, because we like DeciBio. I initially started the firm back in 2009. So it's been a while. It's 17 years now. And what that means is that if people switch job every 3 to 5 years, you can actually see them through different companies. And I think that's actually when these people are at these transition points, it's also a great opportunity for you to be actually demonstrating that you care about them. And we don't do that like artificially. Like we actually do genuinely care about these people, again, because we share a very similar mission and interest. in accelerating precision medicine. And so what we try to do is whenever people are in between jobs, and we notice that on LinkedIn, for example, is reaching out saying like, hey, I've just noticed that you just switched job, or you left the current companies. I'd be happy to catch up and try to see if there is anything we can do to help out. And again, it has to be genuine. I think you can't really manufacture that. People will read between the lines, but if you do it genuinely, I think that's the way to do it, like authentically caring about people.
That is the way to roll indeed. There are so many things I want to follow up on, Stephane, but I need to be conscious of time. So definitely maybe an anchor to get more into that precision medicine topic and on the different aspects you run the business. But a little curveball question I want to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
What's the number one challenge that you guys are facing right now? What's the one nut that you know once you crack, you're going to take the whole thing to the next level? What would that be for you?
Well, the easy answer to this one would be AI. I think that it's
Shocker.
moving so quickly. Yeah, exactly. It's moving so quickly that, really trying to find how is it that we essentially benefits from all of the investments that are going into AI and essentially pick up the ball right where they stop, right? Because any investment that you make that overlaps with, the investment that Claude are doing, you're just wasting your time. They're just gonna just outcompete you in days what would take you a year to build, right? So that's probably like the easy answer. But let me try to give you a second one that might be more interesting. And I think it goes back to the point or the question that you asked with regard to scale. And it is making sure that as we scale the company and add processes in place, we don't essentially lose the culture of what made DeciBio great. And I think that's one thing that's extremely important, is how it is that you scale culture and scale judgment. It's a big one. And then I'll give you one last one, which is not keeping me up at night, but definitely interesting, is how is it that we compete against the big guys? When you look at MBB, this large consulting firm, these guys have amazing talent. They're extremely smart, but they don't focus on precision medicine. We like to say that whenever we work with a client, we tell them every single one of the clients we have internally are either a direct competitor of yours, a client, or potential partners. So we're extremely narrow in what we do, and that's the reason why we are a good partner. And I think for a challenge for us is how it is that we can try to package that message in ways that resonate with people so that they feel more comfortable going with us as opposed to going with one of the big guys.
I love this. I want to double down on a few things and pick your brain on another one. But that's what we try to push as a messaging overall within the consulting space, is how many guests, prospects, clients are like, yeah, I can service anyone. I mean, no later than this morning, I was with a lady. She was like, I can help the world. I can save the world with my thing. I'm like, I don't doubt that. Genuinely. But people are people. They want to see that you've helped other people who look exactly like them, who think like them, who do the same thing as them, who smell like them. And then they're going to be able to say, okay, this is legit. Mm-hmm. And I think that aspect that you mentioned, so kudos to you, being so niche and so precise on what you do is, I think, in my opinion, the differentiator in how you compete with the MBBs. But linking to the other topic, which is scale with talent, the MBBs have the best brand in terms of employer for like the best talents, and this is how they attract the next gen. Although the consulting model is very much evolving. We had a partner at Deloitte on the show. The episode is gonna go live soon, and explaining that we were shifting from the like pyramid structure of consulting to more for like diamond shape. Mm-hmm. So less junior analyst thanks to AI. But the next question is, how do you train this like middle management level, which is AI enabled, if you don't have people to feed that middle management layer at the bottom? So Interesting challenges. So maybe to pick your brain on this, Stephane, how are you thinking about that scale aspect? How do you scale a consulting firm by having the right talent, retaining them, not diluting the culture and the brand? And obviously, it's a challenge, so you haven't solved that yet, but super curious to hear your thoughts on this. How are you thinking about doing it?
So one thing that we do, for example, is those are little tactics that you can implement. For example, once a year, and we just had that 2 weeks ago, we actually have a company-wide offsite when the entire company across all offices, we have offices in LA, San Francisco, New York, and London, come together in one place where we remind the team about our strategy, about why we do what we do, and also just remind ourselves that we're also here to have a good time. So we actually mostly have just a lot of fun, right? And as I said, I think that ultimately to scale, you just have to make sure that the culture just continues to trickle down, right? That, and I think you're right that this is going to be a very interesting challenge. We have not quite yet, we continue to recruit analysts. It's certainly like the number of analysts that we recruit have gone down compared to peak 2021, but we continue to recognize that you do need to actually train people as analysts, because in order to be a good associate, you need to be a good analyst, and to be a good manager, you need to be a good associate, because like ultimately you need to be able to do the job of everyone below you, so that like it enables you to be like the best manager as you can be. So it's a challenge. We'll see how we solve that one. As I said, we have an entering class this year, which is going to be the same size as the entering class that we had last year. So, we're bullish on AI, but we're hoping that because we have kind of wind in our tail with this field of precision medicine really taking off, and we can talk about why that's the case. It's, that's something I'm more passionate about. Like, this is something that's been happening for 30 years, right? Precision medicine starting in 1998. So why is it that we think that now we have wind in our tails? But we do believe that it's going to enable us to continue to justify hiring young people, because we're going to have a kind of like growth that exceeds growth of the consulting market.
Stephane Budel, ladies and gentlemen. Stephane, this was an absolute masterclass. Thank you so much for coming on the show. If people want to find out more about you, see what you do, DeciBio, where should they go?
They should go to decibio.com.
Clear, simple call to action. I can say, so we'll put all the links in the description. I can say one thing for sure, Stephane, is that you've gained at least one new connection on LinkedIn out of this interview. Me, I've just added you. Stephane, thank you so much for coming on the Principal Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Principal Podcast. We hope you've learned valuable lessons and strategies to grow your firm and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.